Rise Up is the title of this sermon. It is a sermon for springtime. It's a sermon for Passover. It's a sermon for hope. Oh, and here we are. Together in our tech again. What a week. What a week. I seem like I start every sermon these days with, oh my gosh, can you believe the week we've had? And it's true always and over and over. Notre Dame on fire, burning up the sky. Relics saved, relics burned. Atheists singing Ave Maria, holding hands with hands that were holding rosaries. Billionaires instantly offering billions to resurrect the cathedral. Wait, what? What about the black churches that burned? What about the mosque, which actually turned out just to be a guardhouse? Praise be Allah. Praise be God. Praise be the moment. What about the cathedral of the world? This is Earth Day. So suddenly that moment of solidarity became a moment of outrage again. And then the Mueller report was released on Maundy Thursday. Just as Congress was taking a spring break. And in my small circle, there have been many deaths this week. And even as we feel ripped apart, torn open, we are still connected, even if we might feel isolated and alone. Passover began on Friday, which is also Good Friday, the celebration of Jesus' crucifixion. And I know there are several people in this room that did not even realize that this was Easter Sunday. We get very busy. Some of you perhaps only realized it was Easter Sunday because you were watching Notre Dame burn on TV. And I had someone call me and go, oh, it's Easter this Sunday! I went, yes. It's also Passover starting Friday. It's also Holy Week. And Paris is burning. But Paris did not burn. The ground under Notre Dame has been a site of sacred ritual since well before Christianity began, and it will continue to be so. Fire cleanses even as it destroys. It can allow us to see what really matters, what is real. Before we worship texts or institutions, the bee was one of our earliest images of the divine, and if you smell these Mexican sunflowers, they smell just like honey. And they were, in fact, before they were here, covered with bees. And I understand there's honey that has come all the way from New Zealand, from Christchurch, a sweetness out of a place that is recovering from unspeakable tragedy in our coalition afterwards. It's worth noting for me that the 3 hives on the roof of Notre Dame survived the fire. Some may think the relics that were lost in the fire, they've been bemoaning them, the bones and the teeth of Saints Denis and Genevieve that they put there in this fire to protect Notre Dame. Some will tell you they failed. I will say they did not. Yes, there is great damage done, but there's also great cleansing that has happened. So, as I watch the reruns of people holding hands on the street, as I watched people, strangers, coming together and looking at what had happened and what might be possible. As I watched the bees go back and forth from those hives, I saw hope. For the church is not a building. It's the people. And if we're going to be truly universal, it's all the people. Holy days are about connection. Not only the connection which connects us to this great mystery, not only the connection that is what is outside and within us that I have no name for, but the very real connection between each and every one of us, our network. It's a time that we connect with each other. Why do we still celebrate these holidays? Why do we do this? We do this because of the fabric of life that we weave together that says we are important, this life is important, this planet is important, the wheel of the year as it turns is important, worthy and has value. Shortly after I moved to New York, I made a New York. Yes, I made a new friend in New York too, but this friend is a friend I made in Florida. And as our friendship grew, it became very important to her that I was saved. Specifically saved by Jesus. And specifically saved by Jesus in the way that she understood salvation to be by Jesus. My mystic truth was too expansive for her. She simply needed to know that I would be in heaven for her. That I would be in heaven with her. That as our friendship grew, it would be eternal. For her, this world was filled with misery that only made sense if it was temporary. She could not bear loving me and losing me to all eternity. She had suffered too much loss. And I could not give her a story of salvation she could understand through her pain. She simply did not have the emotional bandwidth to remain my friend. And I think about her every Easter. When we are so busy judging others' religious choices, we often fail to see their truths, born out of pain and their personal suffering. But there are universal truths for all humans. We need to belong. We need connections, and we need hope. And that, I believe, is what the spring holidays are. This past Friday was the first night of Passover. Religious Jews all over reflect, celebrate, and give thanks for being freed from bondage in the story of Exodus. I, like many of you children, grew up with this story in our own versions of the Seder's, and questions of why do we do this story each year, but also why do religious Jews around the world clear their homes of every crumb of unleavened bread, you even walk around carrying a candle. I mean, spring cleaning is always a good idea. Advanced spring cleaning 101, not necessarily a bad thing. But we do it a disservice if we turn it just into that, because it's more than that. Some will simply tell you that the Torah tells you to celebrate the story of Passover. Well, yes, it does. It says so very specifically to tell the story to your children every year. It does in Exodus 12:26, 13:8, 13:14. It's also in Deuteronomy 6:20. Yes, we're supposed to tell the story. Which makes you wonder why, if the early Christians told it every spring, why after a couple of centuries they stopped? Why this story out of bondage and slavery was stopped? Oh, right. Roman Empire. They needed soldiers. They had slaves. Get it. Who controls your stories of connection, controls your ability to rise up. Who controls our stories, controls our world. What has enslaved you in the past? What is your story? What enslaves you now? What do you see that's enslaving others? But also remember, this story, as written in the Orthodox canon, calls us specifically to remember we are all God's children, not to rejoice in the pain of others, not to rejoice even in the pain of our enemies. But the more risky question is, how am I a part of the suffering of others? How am I the goddess of the dawn who forgot about the cruelty of winter? How can I help those who are still in bondage? How can I help others rise up? As a child, I went to chapel daily and Mass on Wednesdays. Yes, I was raised UU and in high church. Above the altar, there hung a statue of the crucified Jesus. I thought it was crucified. So instead, I always searched out the images of Mary. Mary. Oh, the beautiful whitewashed Mary, clad in heavenly blue gown, eyes open, always blue. Gently to receive all who came before her. She was my version of a Disney princess. A clean, racist version of a possibly real Jewish woman of the Middle East, whose life story has become co-mingled with deep truths from non-ordinary realities. We create our icons in ways we can access them, but we allow others to decide what attributes to enhance and downplay. The attribute of a mother who watched her son crucified, and yet she somehow looked beatific. How? is that story. And still we rise. For me, a patient, giving, always accessible mother was more useful than a bloody corpse hanging on an archaic instrument of execution. Right, I had it catching my breath. As a teen, I remember challenging my elders with the idea of wearing a miniature electric chair around my neck. Or, if I'm getting really pokey, a gas oven. Or, given our history of lynchings, why not a golden noose, Grammy? Just how many times have we killed Christ? How many times? It is far more comfortable to gloss over and make fun of the crucifixion portion of the Easter story in most liberal faiths. It's too messy. It's too graphic. It's too real. The ownership of the idea that a man suffered for us is too intimate. Many of us, Christian and non-Christian, questioning whatever you identify as, forget his teachings and need only to make him a God. He's God. He's God. We lose his vulnerability, his humanity. We create him into a king, a dead golden idol literally hanging around our necks. But if we look at the story in all its variations, another question floats to the surface of our inquiry. If Jesus in his humanity died for our sins, our missteps, our wrongdoings, who is dying for them now? In the text of resurrection, his followers repeatedly fail to recognize him. They all do not see him. He looks like someone else. That is the real, hard, ugly lesson, stripped bare. How do we see the divine in others, but in this particular story of this particular weekend, how do we see the sacrifice? When we hide behind dogmas and creeds, or when we judge those that need them, we lose the question of the lesson. And all spiritual lessons are based on questions. They all are the inquiry. Can you have a flower without a seed? So then I had to ask myself, who's died for my greed, my avarice, my comfort, and yours in the past and in this moment? How do we rise up without getting buried by the guilt of those truths? The shame. It's big. Let's look away. Let's not look at Easter. Throughout history, this has become a sleight of hand, the illusionary magic trick of the power elite. Shifting the story from one of community and connection, I didn't recognize you, I will feed you anyway. Come to my common table, all are welcome. That is how Passover, that is how the Easter celebrations, that is how the common people celebrated the spring rising up. Shifting the story from one of community and connection into one of individual salvation that simply doesn't really apply to most of what you do in this life gives power to those that want it and desire it away from us. We bury our collective power in individual shame. That's hard to sit with. That's hard to acknowledge. What's the universal element in all spring holidays? We gather together. We eat. We comfort. We share. We connect. Because good stories always have a shadow or a mirror meeting, this holiday we can also look at what has to die so truth can be seen. What do we need to burn? To expose? To cleanse? I mean, it might be a pyrogenic forest, an old cathedral, or an old idea. What do we need to release to be more present in our lives? What leaves do we have to rake up so the tender shoots will be able to reach the sun? The crucifixion of Jesus is often blamed as a political event, and usually a deeply anti-Semitic one. But I want to argue this again. The crucifixion is not a political event. Resurrection is a political event. Resurrection is a reconnecting event, a community establishing and nurturing event, an idea that needs tender care, repeated attention like a seed seeking the light. This is the idea. This is the idea of resurrection. I will never lose you, my friend, because you will always live in my heart. I will live in yours. I will hold your stories of truth and pain, and I will share them. And I will give you my stories of truth and pain, and you can share them. And together we can all rise up. I will see the holy in you. I will show you the holy in me. Resurrection is a revolutionary act. You cannot kill an idea once it has been planted in the heart. You cannot kill love. We come up with stories of resurrections and rebirth again and again and again. All cultures have them. This Lent I began rereading the New Testament, edited by Hal Kosig. Anybody know? Ooh, you all should know him. He's a founding member of the Jesus Seminaries. He's a pastor, former Anglican priest. He's a professor of theology at too many institutions for me to rattle off. And yes, this was one of my go-to texts. I find new food in it each time. This time I found over and over again references of the crucifixion being specifically on a tree. Which brings me back to the imagery of the tree of knowledge, as well as the tree of life. I used to do quite a lot of humane education work, going into classrooms and libraries, but the most often requested was not actually about raising up humane behaviors in our children as much as I wanted it to be. It was mostly about how to keep kids from getting bit. They were bite prevention programs, and Be a Tree, true. Be a Tree is what we used to teach, as a way of making children not run. For running will engage a dog's chase reflex, which will cause more bites. So what you want to do is you want to be still, because running is a major cause of bites. But we rapidly discovered that telling kids to be a tree would actually make them less safe. Why? Because they didn't just be a tree, they became a tree! They became a tree, they grew branches. The very creative ones were willows in the wind. And of course all that movement made the dog go poof, right up to them. We're like, okay, this is not going to work. We will change this. You will be a tree trunk. You'll be a tree trunk, and you will keep your arms down by your side, hands clutching your bark. And you will look down, and you will watch your roots grow deep into the ground. And then, in general, most dogs will simply come up to you, sniff, and sniff the ground, and walk away, or sniff long enough for someone to come and put a leash on them and take them away from the child. This is good advice for you to come out with. If you come out with nothing else from this sermon, just remember, be a tree. If a dog is coming up to you, you will be safe. There's salvation in all different kinds of stories. So we changed Be a Tree, and it was good advice, no matter what your age. See, we have to remember that salvation looks like a lot of different things. And the root word of resurrection means to stand up. Resurrection means standing up. So the last thing you want to do when you're in danger is actually sit down. You want to stand up. So what are you standing for? Oh wait, she went from metaphor to reality. Just like that. What are you standing for these days? What have you stood up to? How did that feel? Was it scary? Could you do it again? How would you do it again? Where do you stand? That's the question. Where do you stand on the issues? Where do you stand? I'm standing right here, right now. Let all these various questions be part of your meditations. Last weekend, I was at a conference on the human-animal interactions held at the wonderful Green Chimneys in Brewster, New York. I was thinking of the Be a Tree bite prevention lessons because human-animal interactions conference, and an image of a risen Christ as the tree of knowledge formed. Right there, right while I was looking at a camel, right there while I was outside, watching daffodils try to bloom. And the teaching from one of my monastic mentors came into my head. We are not called called to idolize Jesus, but to emulate him. The reality behind the What Would Jesus Do merchandise, which by the way now is all over my computer, as I was saying the other day. Hint, he probably would not have third world employees earning feudal wages making little plastic eggs with the initials WWJD for first world egg hunts. Just saying. Although I could have ordered them by several dozen. Anyway, listening at that moment, on that farm, I stood there, in my body, pretending to be a tree. And I went out again afterwards and pretended to be a tree, first watching my roots grow into the ground, rooting me in my Judeo-Christian heritage and the earth, and then in my family of origin, and then in my species, and then in my planet. And as I rooted myself, I let my arms reach up and out to the sides, rising up while rooted. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. My feet together, my arms outstretched. I want you to go home and try this. I urge you in public, stand in the traditional image of the crucifixion. Stand like the tree of life. 1, 2 ideas. They came. This is such a vulnerable position. I am now protected by the pulpit. It is more vulnerable if I stand out here. It is an extremely vulnerable position to hold your arms way out and your feet together. It's also an open position, a giving position, a warm position. It is both and I think that is key. I think that is the lesson. You must be vulnerable and giving, and you must risk it. And after you do that, stand there for a while like this, feeling all the feels of vulnerable giving. Just take one step to the side. And suddenly you're a little more stable, and you're star-stuck. In this position you have 4 points, like the cardinal directions, like the cross. In this position, you suddenly have 5. And in those 5, we can remember we are star-stuck. Those little stars we drew as a kid, from the top to the bottom, to the left, to the right, all the edges and margins of my paper are covered with them. Like the stars that Betsy Ross put on the first flag of freedom, like the pentagons of the pagans. Like Carl Sagan reminding us, we are star-stuck. We're made of star-stuck. We are the way the cosmos knows itself. That is it. That is everything. We are trees of light, and we are dust of stars. Eternal and holy. Let us rise up and shine our light into this world, and in doing so, help others to rise up. For we are all connected, and those connections are